Okay, so in a previous video, we went over installing the turn signal switch and the wiper switch on a 1977 MGB. In that video, we talked about setting up a horn switch. Now, the 1977 MGB doesn't have a horn switch in the center of the steering wheel. It's on the actual turn signal switch where you have to kind of honk from the side like this. And because there's no switch, there's no mechanism or hardware in the center of the steering column to allow for a center horn switch. However, when you decide to put a wood steering wheel in on your vehicle, many of them come with a hub that supports a center switch, right? Now, a lot of these hubs are designed for older model cars, the 60s and whatnot. They have a disc that that would, reside on the center console, that all you have to do is pass a wire through it, and that disc will allow you to use this centerpiece as the switch. You just plug it in here and off you go. Well, on the 1977, I don't know exactly which model year it is where they stopped doing that, but they don't have a disc to allow for that center horn switch. There's not really a mechanism out there for it. There's a lot of hodgepodge little solutions, and usually what most folks will do is they'll take some wire and they'll just wrap it 4 times around so that, when you're turning the steering wheel, it'll wrap and unwrap that wire, and then you'll get away with it. Well, the problem with the wire solution is that the wire comes up over the top here, and it creates a wear point. Either the wire will over time bend and become frail and then fray, and it'll short out. So you don't want to be driving down the road every time you turn the wheel, the horn start honking, or just ground out the horn switch altogether and create a fire hazard under your dash. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over my solution to the center horn switch on a 1977 MGB using the wheel hub provided by Moss. We talked about this in the previous video, and it comes with a center horn switch and a little medallion that you can put on it after the fact. We're going to use the mounting points on the turn signal switch right here to mount a 3D printed disc. Now I've went ahead and took measurements on the existing center console and the surround that goes around the steering column, and this fits on the inside, and these holes fit onto these holes, and you can see I even have a little recess right here, so a little 1 millimeter recess to accommodate this little ridge right here. So these all sit nice and flat, and the holes all line up right there. So the idea is that we'll screw this in, the wire will come in through this little slot, and then the wire will come up through here. I have I've 3D printed a little sleeve here. I bought a spring at the hardware store. This spring goes in here. This little sleeve goes in the hole right here. And then I'm going to take this piece, this brass screw, and I'm going to create a little plunger that's going to ride on this little copper disc that I've cut out. This little copper disc will be connected with the wire that's going to pass up through here, and that'll run the hot signal through here, through the little plunger. It'll come out of the hole right here. The wire will have a wire coming out of that, which will then be plugged into here, and Bob's your uncle, everything's going to work just fine, he said confidently. I'm going to make these 3D models available online. If you're interested in 3D printing, you'll be able to print your own. At the request of somebody earlier who saw another one of my 3D printing videos, I'll print these for you if you want. We'll put them on eBay and make them accessible if you want me to print them for you. And so we'll get going on that. So let's go ahead and get going with this brass plunger here. I need to make this brass plunger fit inside this spring and I'm going to use this part of the head as a small little interface that will run around on the inside of this disc when you turn the wheel. So that's the plan. So just need to run these threads off of here and make it fit onto the screw, and then I'll measure the distance to make sure that I get about half of it going through here, so I don't have any deflection, you know, moving it around. I don't want it to get bound up in there. I have 4 millimeters of play in here. I've measured for that, so I have about 4 millimeters of play, and so let's go ahead and grind this down and start the assembly on this thing. All right, so here you can see I've got the slot on that screw head ground down, and I'm making it kind of a subtle cup over the top. I don't want to make this so that it's going to become abrasive as it runs inside the groove here. And I'm going to put some dielectric grease in here just as a lubricant. But the idea here is to increase the surface area so that it doesn't become, if it just make like a point on here, then it would be a wear point, and it would just be gouging, you know, over time it would be gouging through there. But I want to make a kind of a wide surface that's cupped so that it can address that surface and create a wider contact area that won't become abrasive. So that's I think that's a good start for the head that's going to ride on top there. Let's go ahead and pull these threads off and make this thinner, and then we can work on the length. Once I get that done, I'm going to solder on the wire that's going to come off the end here, and then we'll get into assembly. Right, so there you go. Slides right into that spring just fine. That'll be the spring catcher. And this whole arrangement will go into this deal right here. You can see how that plunger works. Just like that. Now all we have to do is solder on the wire at the end here so the wire can come out the end, and then we can go into just plugging all this into the car. Alright, so got the soldering done. This part right here turned out to be a whole lot harder than I figured. Getting a wire to come straight out from the center of another shaft is pretty hard to do because you have to get everything hot in order to solder it, in order to get this to stand upright, I had to put it on a vice grip, which kept sinking the heat out. The other thing is that the solder kept wanting to dribble down, and this is a controlled thickness because the spring has to go over it. The other thing is I had planned on having the insulation go all the way up to the end here, but turns out insulation doesn't like heat either, so it kept trying to crawl up. And then once the insulation had crawled up, it made a bump right here, which you can see I had to shave down because otherwise it was creating resistance on the hole right here. So now it all works. I got the spring in there. I actually shortened the spring just a little bit, just to give it a little bit more room. It doesn't need to have that much power, but it just needs to ride smoothly. And you can see the wire moving out through the tip here. So that insulation, you can see, was going to be a problem. It kept sticking on it. But I skinned it back, and it all looks good now. The other one for the disc, the soldering for the disc, this was very straightforward. Just lay it down. I took a tab, one of these right here, and just took off the sheath, flattened out the round edge, and then just soldered it in place on this copper sheath. Now the way this is going to be assembled is this copper goes in like that. Wire comes through right here and then connects to this right here. That is the hot wire. That makes this circuit right here the hot circuit. And then this gets installed through the hole. Right here. And you can see it just sits right there. Now when you put this in there, see how it slides in there. As that moves, you have a circuit. So that's really how that works. And I have 4 millimeters to play with here, and you can see that the spring is doing its thing when I expand that. So this is just fine, and it meets the tolerance. You see everything all fits in there just perfect. I don't know if you can see up in there. The copper doesn't interfere with anything or short out. This right here is grounded, so you don't want the copper to touch this center post. The outside of the copper is shielded with this outside of the plastic here. So that's the design, and I think that that's going to work just fine. So let's go ahead and get this into the car. All right, step 1 of installation is to put your steering wheel in the center. How do you do that without a steering wheel, without having been able to drive your car to know that you have it centered? Well, the way that I did it, I got up underneath here. I measured the distance between the tie rod end and this joint right here, and compared it to the other side. And if they're the same, then you know that the tie rod ends are in the same orientation, and you should have the street or the car pointing straight forward. I just did that with a tape measure. Your measurements might vary, but just measure from right here to right here, and use the center, because you know the nuts might have some irregularities. But use this center point. Measure from the center of the bolt over there to the center here, and if the other one is the same measurement, then you know you have your steering wheel oriented in the center. Moving on. All right, I'm going to put this centerpiece in, this little wheel. I've run the wire through that little wire access hole there, and I've put a crimp on there. Now we're going to go ahead and take off these little screws that hold the turn signal on. There's one on the top, one on the bottom, and we're going to put those into their respective holes. And that should put this in permanently. Let's go ahead and get that done. Kind of a two-hand job. There you can see all installed. Nice and snug. It's not going to wobble around in there. Now you see I have the cowl here kind of loosened up. I took these bolts out so it was easy to get access and to route that wire. So I'll close that up once I get all done. But just FYI, that's undid on purpose. You may or may not need to have this open or gain access, but just made it a little bit easier. All right, so the next thing is to route this wire, this little blue wire. It comes in through the bottom, like I showed you. I left enough slack in there so that you can route it around so that it doesn't go, across anything or create, because these are moving parts in here. These are going to move, and you don't want the wire to be touching that. So what I did was I made it so that when you put this disc on, you can have enough wire so that it stays on the inside of the channel. And if you put it right over here, you should be fine with that. So let's go ahead and put that copper piece in there. You can see the copper piece has a matching connector right here, and you should be able to slide that in right there. All right, that's a two-hand job, so I'll cut back in a second. All right, so there's that copper piece in. It's just laid in place. The spring that pushes against this should keep that in place, and it shouldn't travel at all. You can see the connector right here. You can see down in there is not rubbing on the moving parts here, so we won't have any kind of wiring problems or entanglement. And it runs all the way up in there. You can see the blue wire coming around and goes up into that right there. So, all right, let's move to the next step, which is to put the hub on and put the spring on there, and then we'll see where we're at. All right, like I said, we have the steering centered. The top knot on the hub is up here, and you have it's a nine bolt hub, so they have two at the bottom and one at the top. You see this is installed. It's all the way down. It's integrated and it's touching in. You see I have no gap or overlap. You can actually almost see the mechanism if you look back in there, but it's all kind of flush looking. It looks really good. We'll tighten up this cowling here as soon as we get all done here. But with the hub in place, the wire on the inside of the spring mechanism goes onto the inside of this little switch. Now, these little springy things right here, they connect to the inside of the hub right here. So, I mean, if I click the switch right now, nothing will happen. But if I put the switch in, yeah, so with this installed, and again, I can take this out really easy without marring it up. But with this installed, it's grounded. Now when you hit the switch, see, it works just fine. And you can hear a little spring doing its little thing. So I have a positive connection in there, and we don't have to worry about having wires or get all frayed up in here or anything like that. So that's my solution for a horn switch on a 1977 MGB. If you're all interested in this, if you have any comments or anything, please throw them in the comments. I love the banter. I like to jaw back and forth with y'all. It's always good to share your knowledge and information with other people. So if you have more knowledge on this topic, please do share it. And again, I'm going to post the 3D models for these custom 3D prints on my Onshape account, so you'll be able to download those if you're into 3D printing as well. All right, so that's all I have for you this week. Make sure you check back as we get a new steering wheel. Should be in today. And then I'm going to put the rest of the interior together, and then maybe we'll have it out for a ride this Labor Day weekend. All right, cheers.